Welcome back to our summit. Um, Today I'm very honored to have my dear friend Mary Koncel. She will be talking about the Devil's Garden wild horses. Mary is a longtime advocate and really was instrumental in helping me personally when we were in the fight for the theater was about wild horses. So I'm going to turn it over to Mary. And if you guys have questions, again, just put them into the chat and we will try to answer them after Mary's presentation. So
Mhm.
thank you for being here, Mary. We appreciate you and all that you do.
Thank you so much, Chris, and thanks for those kind words and for hosting this summit. And I have to tell people this. Chris and I found out about a year or so ago that we're both from Chicago and we grew up within blocks of each other. So I just find that kind of a cosmic coincidence that two people from two people from Chicago ended up being wild horse advocates. Anyway, as the title suggests, I'm going to provide an update on the Devil's Garden wild horse herds because a lot has been going on in the last year as well as this year. So, Chris, if you could change the slide. This is an outline of what I'm going to be discussing. I do want to mention that the background will include some information that I presented last year, but I think it's important to repeat because it provides a context for what's going on now. I also want to mention for full disclosure that I am a plaintiff in the 2025 lawsuit along with Bonnie Colrider and Laura Lee from Wild Horse Education. Next slide. While most wild horse and burro herds in the West are managed by the Bureau of Land Management, some of them are also managed by the United States Forest Service, which is under the auspices of the Department of Agriculture. According to 2014 data, which is clearly not very up to date, there are 53 wild horse and burro herds on 2.5 million acres of national forest in 9 states. Of those territories, 34 are active, meaning that wild horses and burros still live on them. But at least 19 of them are inactive, and that means that they no longer have horses or burros. From FOIA requests, I found out that probably 7 to 8 of those inactive territories have livestock grazing. The estimate in 2014 was that there were 7,100 wild horses and about 900 wild burros. But as I mentioned, that data is very, very outdated. So I'm not sure if those numbers would be up or down. A lot of times people kind of forget that the Forest Service exists, but it does. And so often when I've written, you know, blogs or whatever, people and mention that it's the Forest Service, people will say, oh, the BLM is doing it again. So I think so often what happens is that the Forest Service flies under the radar of the BLM and don't really get the attention that's really deserving. Uh, the BLM and the Forest Service also work under very different regulations. For example, an individual is limited to purchasing no more than 4 horses or burros from the BLM in a 6-month period. But the Forest Service allows up to 24 horses or burros a day with no limits on the number of days that someone can come back and get more horses. The Forest Service also does not freeze brand their animals like the BLM. Instead, it microchips them, which makes them hard to identify when they show up in kill pens. And from reports, we do know that they are showing up in kill pens. While the Modoc National Forest, where the Devil's Garden horses are, it boasts a high adoption rate. Many of the horses are actually, and foals, are sold. This means that they lack the protections of the adoption contract, and their titles pass immediately to the owners, allowing them to flip the horses at any time. Next slide. Um, At one point, the Devil's Garden Wild Horse Territory was home to California's largest wild horse herd. And it was also the Forest Service's largest territory in terms of acreage and numbers of horses. It's located on the Modoc National Forest in Northeast California, which is just outside of Alturas, which is a tiny little town, and it consists of about 258,000 acres. Most of it is Forest Service land and some BLM tribal and private land. Next slide. Chris, we're doing really good with the slides so far. Um, for the last 12 years or so, the Modoc National Forest has been managing the Devil's Garden wild horses under a 2013 territory management plan. And one of the most important points that I can make about this management plan is that it was bought and paid for by ranching interests that include the the Modoc Farm Bureau, Modoc County, the Modoc Cattle Men's Association, and ranchers with grazing permits on Devil's Garden. And the reason for this influx of private money is that the Forest Service has no dedicated funding for its wild horse and burro program. So in the case of the Modoc National Forest, it looks to partners to help fund and implement the management of the Devil's Garden horses. The largest funder is the Modoc Farm Bureau. Between 2012 and 2016, 990s filed by the Bureau show that it distributed $368,000 to hire retired employees to, quote, go into the field with GPS cameras to record data on wild horses and the impacts that they are making on allotments. So much for objectivity. The result of these partnerships is a territory management plan that essentially ensures that massive private livestock grazing will continue and that the wild horses are not competing for valuable storage or water. Three of the major points of this 2013 management plan are that it set a ridiculously low appropriate management level, or AML, of 206 to 404 horses, while allowing up to 3,700 cat-cow pairs and 2,900 sheep. So it's very disproportionate. It also eliminated 23 acres of the middle section. Even uh, even though the previous territory management plans included this middle section, the Forest Service decided that it was an administrative error and just completely got it out of the map. And also, instead of implementing fertility control and rangeland improvements, it prioritized the use of roundups. In fact, it actually prohibited the use of fertility control until AML was reached, but allowed Gonacon experiments on mares and stallions. And I will talk about that in a bit. As a result of this 2013 management plan, between 2016 and 2024, about 3,100 horses were removed, leaving about 381 going into 2025. Next slide. Oh, no, I'm sorry. You can go back. It also caused the death of hundreds of horses and foals by, for example, broken necks and legs that happened during the roundup, or actually in the Forest Service's Double Devil holding corral. And also, evisceration of geldings was happened very often. And I can't remember the exact number, but I think it's close to 100. Then we have to think about the cost to the American taxpayers. According to spending.com, which is a wonderful website. The awards for just the contractors between 2018 and 2024 amounted to about $4.5 million. With it, that's just 6 years. But that $4.5 million is just the beginning. Final costs are really hard to come by. I've tried to file FOIAs, but it's a little bit complicated. But the projected budget in the Forest Service work plan system for the 2020 roundup came to over $1.4 million for hay, for vetting, for transportation, and all the other costs that are associated with keeping these horses in holding. Um, the 2013 Territory Management Plan also resulted in several lawsuits, which I'm going to talk about in a bit. In 2024, the Forest Service released a new Territory Management Plan that was supposed to be approved and implemented in January of 2025. But before I move on to that new plan, I want to talk a little bit about the Gonicon experiments on the Devil's Garden mares and stallions. Even though the 2013 Territory Management Plan prohibited the use of fertility control. In 2023, the United States Geological Survey vaccinated 31 mares from the Forest Service Double Devil corrals with Gonicon, placed tracking collars on them, and released them back into the territory. Then Wildlife Services vaccinated, and this is really awful, a number of Devil's Garden stallions, and we think it was 10 with Gonicon. We didn't know where they were being kept, but this year we did see them at the Double Devil Corral. So besides the irony of the 2013 Territory Management Plan not allowing fertility control, the bigger irony is that the United States EPA's label for Gonicon specifically states that accidental injection of mares will result in fertility. And I thank Bonnie Colrider for being able to dig up this little piece of information. So the question is, why is Wildlife Services conducting a study which crosses multiple ethical and legal boundaries to determine if Gonicon will sterilize stallions when it already knows that it will? And also, why is the Forest Service allowing this type of research? And next slide. This is a map of the Devil's Garden Wild Horse Territory according to the 2013 Territory Management Plan. The areas outlined in red are the east and west sections of the territory, and that area outlined in black is the middle section that I mentioned, which was eliminated. Next slide. I think this is my favorite map because it's a map of all the fencing on Devil's Garden. And I wish I had the technological skills to impose a map of Devil's Garden territory on this map, but I don't. But suffice to say, I think it shows that there's tons upon tons of fencing. And before I went out to Devil's Garden, I thought it would be this huge open range. But as I mentioned, there's just a maze of fencing for all the allotments on Devil's Garden. I think there's 9 of them. Those of us who've spent time on Devil's Garden refer to it as an outdoor zoo. Ranchers lease these allotments to graze their cattle, mostly between spring and late summer, which is the growing season or the green up season. During the grazing season, the gates are closed, so the horses are pretty much stuck in these pastures. Then when the grazing season is open or is closed, the gates are supposedly opened. But the problem is that these horses are stuck in these pastures for a good amount of time, and they can't move around the entire territory to access water or better forage. And if they try, the ranchers blame them for knocking over the fencing, and this becomes a reason for their removal. Next slide. Moving on to the 2025 management plan. In 2024, the Forest Service released a draft of this territory plan that would determine the future of the Devil's Garden wild horses for the next 10 years. It was supposed to be finalized in January of 2025, but it wasn't until September of this year that it was. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. Thanks to the Modoc National Forest partnership with local ranching interests, I truly believe that this plan is no more than a thinly disguised extinction plan for the Devil's Garden horses and another victory for cheap, subsidized private grazing on public lands. And here's why. It allows for the use of Gonacon as a form of fertility control through remote delivery units, which is a kind of a new technology that has had very little field testing. And I don't believe there's any real peer-reviewed journals about this. And as we know, Gonacon also has a growing reputation for causing permanent sterility in mares. We've seen this in the Theodore Roosevelt horses. Second, it continues to maintain the very low AML of 206 to 402 horses, while at the same time not cutting back the levels of private livestock grazing. It also prioritizes additional roundups in order to appease the Devil's Garden Preservation Group. And in response to the 2017 decision, it adjusts the middle section to a mere 114-acre corridor between the east and west sections of the Devil's Garden territory. All of this shouldn't be surprising because once again, the territory management plan was bought and paid for the Modoc Farm Bureau. According to its 990s, between 2020 and 2023, it contributed almost $2 million, and I want to repeat that, $2 million to, quote, hire retired federal employees to collect data to show the impacts that wild horses have on land allotments and to assist the U.S. Department of Agriculture to manage the wild horse population. So history is definitely repeating itself. Chris, next slide. This is a map of the Devil's Garden Wild Horse Territory under the 2025 management plan. As you can see at the bottom is that tiny, tiny little 114-acre corridor. Next slide. So, the 2025 roundup. In the past, the Forest Service, probably the past 7 roundups, they pretty much conducted an aerial survey, but in the spring. But this year, there was no census for the 2025 roundup because there was no money. Instead, an unofficial ground census was done, and it estimated 485 horses. And this ground survey consisted of the Modoc National Forest wild horse and burro specialists using game cameras and riding around on an ATV counting horses. And as you can imagine, it wasn't particularly scientific or accurate. And also the funding for this unofficial survey is unknown. Even though there wasn't any money for the spring census, C.D. Warner was awarded a $650,000 contract. I think last year it had a contract for, I think, $750,000. Between August 27th and September 30th, 276 horses were captured via bait trapping and helicopter, and this was to get down to AML. After the roundup, a December aerial survey was estimated that there were 315 horses. Now, I was going to have a funky numbers page and I forgot to put it in, but I just wanted to just kind of review some of the numbers in terms of the wild horse population. The spring 2024 census estimated that there were 723 horses. The fall 2024 roundup removed 380 horses, which, according to my math, means that there were approximately 343 horses going into 2025. However, the 2025 unofficial ground survey that was conducted, I think maybe in July, said that there were about 485 horses, which meant there was a 70% increase. But after the 276 horses were captured in this fall, my math says that there should be about 209 horses left. Instead, that December 2025 aerial survey estimated that there were around 315 horses, which is a 66% increase. So either the Devil's Garden herd is experiencing this like super ordinary population growth rate where, all the stallions and mares are having twins, or there's some pretty inaccurate counting going on. Next slide. Um, when I talk about Devil's Garden and the Modoc National Forest, I always have to talk about lack of transparency and accountability. And 2025 was particularly egregious. Starting off in January without notifying anybody, the Forest Service resumed the 2024 fall contract. I'm sorry, they resumed the 2024 fall roundup in order to complete the 2024 contract. Then, even though Dr. Teresa Drotar, who is head of the Forest Service's Wild Horse and Burro program, discussed the Gonacon experiments on both mares and geldings at, I think, the BLM advisory board meetings in 2023 and 2024. When I filed for records on these experiments earlier this year, the Forest Service said they couldn't find any. And if you look at this photograph from the 2024 roundup, it clearly shows that there are collared mares. Regarding last fall's roundup, a press release came out on August 15th announcing that the operation would remove 350 horses and would begin on August 2nd, giving the public maybe 2 weeks' notice. But the bait trapping actually began on August 27th. It gets better, though. The Forest Service has been somewhat notorious for trying to block public observation. This year, and it did that by claiming that they had to limit participants to like 6 people because of the size of the blind. But the blind was always this huge area behind some trees. That there wasn't any blind, and there shouldn't have been any issues with the number of people there. But this year, the Forest Service decided to limit public observation to 3 days, Monday, Tuesday, and Saturday, and only to 6 people. And the double corrals where the horses were going was only open for viewing on Saturdays. Now, I was there the second week, and during that week, the Forest Service canceled public observations for 2 of the 3 days that I was supposed to be there, as well as the tour. It also would not we scheduled public observation, but did offer to give us an extra day for the tour. And the reason why they said they had to cancel public observation was because the staff member who was to escort us was sick, and also they had to do helicopter maintenance. Now, I might be being a little paranoid, but the fact that I was a plaintiff and another observer from Wild Horse Education, who, as I mentioned, is also a plaintiff, the fact that we were there made me a little bit suspicious that perhaps they didn't want us to be participating in observing the roundup. Um, Also, when we were at the roundup, and this continued through the whole operation, on the ground, Forest Service staff that was on the ground, including the escort and folks at the Double Devil's Corral, they would not answer any of our questions about the roundup. Instead, we had to send emails to the wild horse and burro specialist. And for the most part, those emails were never answered because she was busy with kind of managing and overseeing the roundup. Next slide. As I mentioned, the 2013 management plan resulted in several lawsuits, and I'll just give you a list of them. In 2024, wild horse advocacy groups sued the Forest Service for arbitrarily eliminating the 23,000 acre middle section and also the questionable appropriate management level. In 2017, the court ruled in favor of the advocates, calling the decision to remove that middle section arbitrary and capricious. It ordered the Forest Service to reconsider its decision and to essentially shrink the territory. And it also ordered the Forest Service to reassess AML. Then, 7 years later, the Forest Service, in response to this decision, developed the revised 2025 Territory Management Plan. In 2017, and I mentioned this group before, the Devil's Garden Preservation Group, and they're this kind of jolly band of vocal and entitled local ranchers. They sued the Modoc National Forest for not reaching AML fast enough. To appease them in a 2021 pretty much sweetheart settlement, the Forest Service agreed to remove at least 500 horses every year until AML is reached, even though no science supported this plan. In 2018, after the Forest Service decided that after 60 days, it wanted to start selling Devil's Garden horses who were over 10 and had obtained, I think, 3 strikes. They wanted to sell them without limitation for $1 a piece, and folks could buy up to 36 horses a week. And ultimately, advocates believe that this was a guarantee that these horses would go to slaughter. Fortunately, there was a lawsuit, as I said, and but it ended up being dismissed when Congress approved appropriation language that included, an appropriation package that included language prohibiting the Forest Service from killing healthy horses or sending them to slaughter. And also, California ended up passing and tightening their horse slaughter bill. I think it was laws, I should say. I think it was Bill 128. Um, Next slide, please. Uh, in 2025, specifically on August 27th, Bonnie Colrider, Laura Lee, and I filed a lawsuit. And initially, we asked for a temporary restraining order and a preliminary injunction to stop the roundup. Shortly afterwards, though, we amended our lawsuit to challenge the 2025 roundup and the 2025 territory management plan. I tried to pull together this summary of all that's been going on, and I think I covered all the main points, hopefully accurately. So I'll start explaining the lawsuit a little bit. Generally, our claim was based on the following. No determination of excess horses was made so that the Forest Service couldn't conduct the roundup because it would be a violation of the Wild Horse and Burro Act, in part because of the questionable censuses. Um, Second, the removal would reduce the Devil Garden horses below the legally mandated AML, a move that we argued exceeds the Forest Service authority and violated the Wild Horse and Burro Act. Third, the Forest Service was conducting the roundup under the vacated 2013 Territory Management Plan and therefore violated NEPA because proper analysis wasn't conducted. And also, too, we believe that our First Amendment rights were violated by the restricted public observation at the 2025 roundup. But the Forest Service, being the Forest Service, kind of pulled a fast one. On September 11th, during the ongoing litigation, the agency adopted the 2025 management plan and argued that it should be retroactively applied to the current roundup. And we believe that this was in an attempt to negate our claim about the legality of the roundup under the 2013 Territory Management Plan. So while the judge did agree that the AML from the 2013 plan was vacated by the 2017 decision by the DC Circuit Court, he didn't issue that temporary restraining order or a preliminary injunction, in part because we did not file it in a timely manner. But remember, the Forest Service only gave us 2 weeks' notice about the upcoming roundup. Also, he felt that at the time there wasn't any proof that the roundup would bring the horses below AML. That said, he did rule that we have demonstrated a likelihood of succeeding on the merits of our NEPA claim because the Forest Service decided to implement the current roundup by relying on the vacated 2013 plan. I know it gets a little complicated. So around this time, we changed our focus and we amended our complaint to challenge both the 2025 roundup and the 2025 territory management plan. And I also want to mention that as part of his initial ruling, the judge also requested that the Forest Service do an aerial survey in October and provide the raw numbers to the court to see if the roundup had indeed caused the horses to fall below AML. And if it had, the Forest Service would have been required to return horses. But because of the government shutdown, the census couldn't happen until December. And that was the census that determined there were 300 and I think 15 horses, which meant that the horses did not fall below AML. So no horses returned. But the Forest Service, being the Forest Service, kind of threw another wrench into the works. While waiting for the census to be completed, the Forest Service agreed not to adopt out any horses or to do any fertility control of the horses in the corrals. We did learn, however, that between, I think it was late October and early November, 74 stallions out of the 112 that were captured had been accidentally accidentally or mistakenly gelded as a result of a miscommunication between corral staff and senior staff. So right now, our goal is to have the court declare that both the gather and the territory management plan violate the Wild Horse and Burro Act as well as NEPA. If that happens, we believe the court should then vacate the 2025 Territory Management Plan and issue a permanent injunction that prevents any future gather or use of fertility control until the agency prepares a new legally sufficient EA with a properly established AML. And I just had a weird message appear on my computer there. Okay. So I know that was a lot to take in. Oh, but one thing, if you want to learn more about the lawsuit, uh, Wild Horse Education has a great series of blogs. So I would encourage you to go to their website. So finally, this lawsuit probably won't be decided until late spring, as there are still a few rounds left in the lawsuit. And I guess that means there's an administrative records phase and also summary judgment. But recently, we also learned that the Devil's Garden Preservation Group is probably going to file to become an intervener. So I think that's all about the lawsuit. Chris, do you want to change the slide? Some final thoughts. I remain hopeful that the lawsuit will be successful and that the Devil's Garden horses won't, or that Devil's Garden, I should say, won't become the next inactive territory. Bringing the herd down to low or mid AML, along with the use of Gonacon, the hard winters, more roundups, and growing predation especially by wolves, would be devastating. Also, the population growth rate is of concern. Although the Forest Service says it's about 15%, we think it's closer to maybe 6 to 8% because there's such a decreasing number of foals being captured during the roundups. Also, we from the horses that were rounded up in the fall, I think it was 70% of them are over the age of 10, which means this is a very aging population. So let's keep our collective fingers together, our collective fingers crossed. And finally, because the focus of this summit is advocacy, I want to end by talking a little bit about advocacy for the Devil's Garden horses. Up until a few years ago, several groups stood up and challenged the Forest Service's management of this very historic and unique herd by, for example, lawsuits, petitions, action alerts, whatever. Sometimes there was cooperation among these groups, sometimes not. But I do believe that they were able to provide effective oversight of what the Forest Service was doing. In the last year or so, most of these groups have walked away from the Devil's Garden horses, even though two of the larger ones are based in California. I can't help to think that if there had been more communication among groups, more willingness to work together, this herd would not be in the precarious situation that it's in. So that said, I want to thank my friend Chris for really stepping up and helping the Devil's Garden horses by hosting action alerts, sharing blogs that I wrote about the ongoing mismanagement of this herd, and actually creating a special web page for them. She's been beyond wonderful, and I think she epitomizes the true spirit of advocacy. So with that, next slide. Um, so before we go on to chat, I want to thank everybody for attending the summit and for caring about our wild herds and public lands. And there's so much going on in our country and in the world right now. I just find it heartwarming and encouraging that people still care about the horses, the burros, and the habitat that they live on. So thank you, and I look forward to any comments or questions.
Thank you, Mary. That was wonderful, and thank you for all the work and advocacy you're doing for these horses. Um, Angela wants to know, can you elaborate on the Devil's Garden group? You said that they did something. She didn't quite get what you were saying.
Oh yeah, that's the Devil's Garden Preservation Group, and that consists of local ranchers. And in 2017, I'm just going to check my notes. Hang on one second. I think it was. Um, I think it was in response to some of the lawsuits by advocates. They decided that the Forest Service wasn't removing horses fast enough to get to AML. So they filed a lawsuit, and basically the Forest Service capitulated, and they gave them this very sweetheart settlement that essentially said, "Yep, we'll remove up to 500 horses a year as long, so we can get down to AML faster." And the irony of that is the last, I think it's 5 or 6 years, I don't have my numbers in front of me, they haven't been getting 500 horses. I mean, they're falling short of that 500 horse goal by maybe 100. Lately, I think the last two roundups I should mention that the Forest Service was hoping to capture, I think it was 350 horses, but again, they fell far short of that. And I believe last year they got 241 or something, and then this year I think it was what 276 or whatever it was. So the Devil's Garden Preservation Group is very, very powerful. And as I said, the Modoc National Forest or the Forest Service really pays heed to what they want. So I hope that answers your question, Angela.
So, Mary, is the preservation group, I'm guessing that they're there to preserve the forest as a whole?
They're there, and I should have mentioned this, they're there to preserve livestock grazing.
Okay,
Yeah,
that makes
I mean,
sense.
that's their goal because, and their claim is that Modoc County needs it, you know, because of the economics of the area. It's a lot of ranching, but there's still room for the horses.
Lori wants to know if you got any support from California residents or politicians.
We had some support from California residents. Bonnie Colrider lives in California, and she has done an awful lot. She's reached out to her horse group, her and just to promote what's going on Devil's Garden. I know that she helped place horses, and she, is part of this lawsuit. We had some support by local or California legislators. And I had a note, but one of them supported California's bill. I think I mentioned this. I think it was Bill 128 to help strengthen the California's laws or regulations on sending horses to slaughter. And that was instrumental and it was supported. And I should have this information and I should have anticipated this question, but also Senator Feinstein was very helpful with trying to preserve the Devil's Garden horses and Forest Service and a number of other federal legislators. They were the ones who pushed the appropriation language that would prohibit the sale of Forest Service horses. And Lori, if you get back to me, I can give you the names of those politicians.
Angela wants to know if you have a small work group to help this herd, especially for Californians.
Um, no, not really. We kind of tried that and it didn't really work. So I'm not sure what to say. Um, I think, keep an eye out for, I mean, I don't know what to say because there was an effort and I don't think that was very successful. So,
Do you have
but I should finish my thought. She can follow up with Wild Horse Education. I think they're the ones who are part of this new lawsuit and, keeping tabs on what's happening with Devil's Garden. I think there's a couple other groups that may occasionally post something, but right now, Wild Horse Education is letting folks know what's going on.
Barbara wants to know where are the horses that were removed in 2025 then?
They are at the Forest Service's Double Devil Wild Horse Corral, and that corral is only it's just a few miles out of Alturas. And as I said, the Forest Service wasn't allowed to adopt any of the horses out until after the December census was completed, or aerial survey, I should say. And once that aerial survey showed that supposedly the horses were not below AML, they opened up adoption and sale. And yeah, so right now they're there. Um, One of the things I should mention is, and it's another difference between the BLM and the Forest Service, is that the Forest Service does not have long-term holding. So they really push to get rid of horses and like I said, even though they boast a high adoption rate at Modoc, they're conflating adoption with sale. And there's a good number of the horses. In the beginning, more than half of the horses were sold. So, like I said, there's a big push to get rid of them because what are you going to do with them? Short-term holding is very expensive. And they're also taking in horses from other Forest Service territories and also, I think, from some BLM herd. And the Devil's Garden Wild Horse, I'm sorry, the Double Devil Wild Horse Corral, they've expanded it recently. So I think it can hold up to 500, maybe 750 horses, but there are definite plans to make it even bigger.
Is there anything that we can do to help you guys, Mary?
Oh, that's a good question, Chris. I think, and maybe this is going back to, I can't remember whose question it was. Um, I would really, really encourage California residents to contact their local and federal legislators and let them know what's going on. I think everybody can advocate for wild horses no matter where they live, but it would be nice if California residents really stepped up for these horses. So I would suggest doing that. When you see action alerts or, you know, anything with any of the California horses, but like I said, now with the Devil's Garden, maybe pass it on. The other thing you could do is write editorials or probably more letters to the editor would be appropriate just to make sure that people know about this herd and that if this lawsuit isn't successful, that this is a herd that can be lost. And I guess that's what I can think of off the top of my head.
Cheryl says another excellent factual presentation. Always heartbreaking to learn the ongoing walls and lack of accountability for this entire herd and extremely poor management. Thank you, Mary, for your detailed presentation and your ongoing work in advocacy.
Thank you
Um,
so much. And I hope I didn't overwhelm you with details, but I don't know. I've been following Devil's Garden for maybe 10 years now, and I'm never surprised with what they can come up with. And like I said, the lawsuit, there have been so many twists and turns in that. It's a little mind-boggling at times. But
Deborah said if you join WHE on Patreon, she spoke about the lawsuit in a live for Patreon. So she said that she plans on having weekly chats. So that would be another good way
oh,
to
that
stay
would be
informed.
great. Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Yep. And then if there's ever any way that we can help Mary, always just reach out and I'll be happy to do what we can to help you
Yep.
also.
Yep. Yeah, and I've been meaning to write a couple of blogs to update your web page for the Devil's Garden horses. And the other thing people can do is that is help to fund lawsuits, not only this one, but other lawsuits. I never realized how expensive lawsuits are, and they are very, very expensive. So that can be a way to help because so often groups don't have the funding to be able to do that. So if you could contribute something, I know Wild Horse Education would be very, very grateful.
Isabella said it's apparent that you are very knowledgeable and passionate about this herd. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
So,
Isabel.
so
It's
thank you,
kind of
Mary.
an obsession. My friends won't let me talk about it anymore. So, and my husband is like, no, go in the other room. So I'm sure that that may be the case with other supporters of wild horses and burros, where sometimes people just feel like, you've talked enough about it. So,
Sometimes I think we can't talk enough about them, right? I mean, just you never know when you're
yeah.
going to get the right person's ear.
Exactly. And sometimes it's surprising, who you talk to. Um, you just never know who turns out to be a really informative and helpful person. Thank you, Lori. Lori is an amazing wild burro and donkey person, and when we got our two wild burros, she was my consultant, and their names are Huck and Puck, and they're wonderful.
Well, thank you. And if there's anything else that we can do, Mary, really just let us know.
Thank you so
Um,
much, Chris. And like I said, I think it's really important, and like I said, it's so nice that people are attending, not just this presentation, but others, because I think having these presentations, having this summit is a way to not only give people information, but also I think to kind of rally them a little bit. And there's some really good stuff going on. I've listened to a number of the presentations, and I'm just impressed. There's, with the Wild Horse Refuge. I love what's happening with the donkey rescue, and I'm blanking on the name. So Peaceful Valley. Those are really important. So thanks,
um,
Chris.
if anybody knows if they want to, I think that she answered. Yeah, so Patreon is an app. I think you can go to their website too,
Mhm.
and just search for Wild Horse Education. You should be able to find her. There may be a link on her website also. I'm not really sure.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, that's a good way to stay up to date. And Laura does a
Mhm.
lot of great work for
He does, yeah.
a lot of different wild horse herds
Mhm.
everywhere. So um, I don't know, Mary. I know that I probably know the answer, but you had said too. How do we get wild horse advocates to work together more? And I really feel like this is something that's so much more important in in the crazy world that we live in right now, where we're really up against so much being flooded in the news,
Mhm.
to be
Mhm.
able to get our voices together. I mean, we really need to come together now more than ever.
I agree. Yeah. And when you think of it, it really is a David and Goliath fight. It's just the reality of it. And as I mentioned, I felt like in the beginning when I got involved with the Devil's Garden wild horses, there were a number of groups that really did come together, and I'm not quite sure what happened in the last couple years. Um, that's a really hard question, Chris. I don't know what to say about it. I see a little bit of that now. There's a roundup of the Lake Pleasant wild burros in Arizona, and I think maybe I've seen emails for action alerts from 3 or 4 groups asking folks to send comments. And I think that's good. It shows that I don't know if they're working together, but at least there's a particular focus. I think it's really difficult because most of the groups are small. They probably have limited budgets, not all of them. Um, I think um, there's a lot of I think there's a lot of stuff going on, and sometimes groups have a particular interest or a particular herd that they want to to kind of rally for. And maybe they don't necessarily have time or the energy to. I also know that wild horse advocates can be, pretty kind of adamant about their position and aren't very flexible if for example, some sort of action alert or petition doesn't exactly fall in line with what their policies are. So I think maybe groups being more flexible. Um, I I don't know. I don't know. Can I ask what do other people think? Because I feel like I'm not doing a very good job answering your question.
Well, Trundle
And what do
said,
you think, Chris? What do you think?
Trundle said it'd be awesome if we could come together for better coordination of funds for all the
Mm,
lawsuits that have to happen in so many different
mhm.
areas, since it's really the best only way to win against the BLM and their
Exactly.
crony.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
I think
go ahead.
I I think that I came into wild horse advocacy in a different way because this is the National Park Service. So, like you said, even
Exactly.
for you with the Forest Service, it's a little bit different than the BLM. But um, I learned a lot, and mostly from you over the last, I don't know, 5 or 6 years now, Mary. My goodness.
Well,
Um,
it's kind of reversed because now I've learned so much from you.
and I'm happy to help in whatever ways I can.
I
But
know, and I appreciate it so much.
I guess what I don't understand and where I feel like we fail as advocates is I can advocate for the Theodore Roosevelt horses, and I don't need you to advocate for them, but can you support me? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Just like I don't know enough about the Devil's Garden horses to advocate for them, but I can support you in ways that we have, right? And I don't
Mhm.
understand why we can't do that. Or like I was talking to Ashley Avis when we had her talk, and
Mhm.
um she's busy with the things that she's doing, we're busy with the things that we're doing, but she's somebody that I can honestly say whenever I go to her and I'm like, hey, this is really important, can you share this, can you whatever, she's
Mhm.
more than happy to do that.
Yeah.
And we would do the same for her. So I don't understand why there can't be more of that. And we had conversations, and I won't name organizations, but I was really disheartened last year. We did this summit, and I can't even remember. It was like 5 days of really literal insanity. It was
Mhm.
all day, every day for 5 days, and people were still contacting us, wanting us to do a 6 day or a seventh day. After that was over with, I had no idea that this was going to happen when we planned the summit, but then we went right into state legislation, and I had to be at the state capitol, which is 2 hours from my
Mhm.
home, for legislative work. And so we spent the whole weekend talking about how, all these different groups, we need to come together, we need to work together. And then at the end of that, I had posted somebody's video on our Facebook page. And out of habit, I usually just put a donate button on our post because we're
Mhm.
a small nonprofit, right? We need money. And they said to me, can you please take the donate button off? We don't want our followers to think they should support your organization. And I
Mhm.
felt very like a knife through the heart. You know what
Mhm.
I mean? Like we all just spent all this time talking about we need to work together, we need to work together. I opened our platform for videos for our YouTube channel. We're sitting here talking about support wild horse education. Absolutely support them because she's
Mhm.
doing things I can't do. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? That
yeah,
are out of my realm. And
yeah.
so it was very disheartening. Like, is our organization not good enough for your followers to support? And I think that that obviously is the big breaking point.
Mhm.
um I believe that, like, can you give our organization $5 and Laura's $5? I think a lot of people do that. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? That's the big hurdle to get past, and I don't know um
I
how we get
totally
there.
agree with you. Yeah. And I had a conversation with someone, and you know about this conversation, Chris, where there's not a lot of money in, going around. And the person I talked to said that, if they post something from another organization with a donate button, from that other organization, they're worried that they could lose, you know, funders or supporters. And also, the person said that something like that their board of directors would not look fondly on that because of the fear of losing donors. And let's face it, we're looking at a very small pot. So where's it going to go? And I understand why organizations are protective of their donors. But on the other hand, and we were talking about this too, Project 2025, it's coming to fruition. And how are we going to fight that if groups don't get together? And I have noticed, and I don't know if folks would agree with me, it seems like some of the smaller organizations that have come about in the last 3 or 4 years, they seem a little bit more open to sharing information and just cooperating. I don't know if other people, believe that too, but maybe we need to be looking towards smaller organizations instead of the larger ones, and maybe some movement toward collaborating and determining what are the priorities, in terms of either lawsuits or whatever. Maybe that could help. I'd love to think that there could be pooling of money for lawsuits, but I guess maybe I'm being a little cryptic. I don't know if that's going to happen, but
We have here in North Dakota, we have a Giving Hearts Day
mhm,
fundraiser. And this is probably, as a nonprofit, one of my favorite things that I participate in because this year, for example, we have a group of 15 different nonprofits for southwestern North Dakota, and we all come together to figure out how can we all have the best Giving Hearts Day
mhm,
event. We all recognize that we're all part of a
mhm.
community, and every single one of our organizations contributes something to the success of our community. Why can't we have that kind of outlook in wild horse advocacy? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Again, I can't do the work that Laura Lee is doing, but she also doesn't know about the Theodore Roosevelt horses, and I
Hmm.
can't help the Fish Springs horses, or,
Hmm.
but we can all come together and realize that we all make up this wild horse advocacy,
Hmm.
in each part of the each one of our little pieces make up a bigger whole,
Hmm.
and that's really the sad thing.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's hard. I mean, it's one thing for groups not to work together, but I've seen examples of where, there's kind of snittiness and between groups, and one group kind of undermining the other.
Absolutely.
And
And we've had that here where
yep,
it
exactly.
makes our work even harder because
Yeah,
we're not only fighting the federal government, but we're fighting other
yeah.
groups that are siding with the park and
Mhm.
trying to discredit the things that we're doing, which just
Yeah,
makes more work for us and more
yeah,
frustration and aggravation.
yeah. And I just saw a comment by, I think it was Deb, that uh, when when a lawsuit happens and it's successful, it sets a precedent for other lawsuits and other wild horse herds. And I think that's a really important comment. Um,
Well, yeah, because if you can prove that the Devil's
Mhm,
Garden horses are in violation of the Wild Horse and Burro Act, yeah, that will open a door for other lawsuits.
mhm,
Absolutely.
mhm. Exactly,
Um,
exactly.
and there are a few organizations, like you said, and I've been lucky to have some really good smaller organizations come and help us
Mhm,
or help explain things or just,
mhm,
stand up and support us in different ways. I mean, even with our legislation that we're trying to get passed, we have 27 different organizations and photographers that came together and said, add my name to the list that legislation needs to be amended. There needs to be changes to strengthen the protection
mhm.
for the horses. Um, so yeah, I don't know that we ever have the answer to that, but some good brainstorm will.
It is. But I also think it's worth asking and it's worth thinking about. Uh, and as you said, I mean, groups, I mean, there's so much knowledge among groups and individuals who've been working on behalf of wild horses and burros, and a sharing of that information it is just so important. And you know, again, we need to be able to do that because, like I said, I mean, we're fighting the federal government, and that's a pretty ominous task. And so when we can share information and help each other, it's the wild horse and burro herds that are going to benefit.
Right. Isabella said there's a lot of knowledge out there, but it's so fragmented. And it is. I've always said too, when people ask us how we did what we did, I learned a lot from Mary. I learned a lot from our lawyers. 5 years ago, I knew nothing. Like a lot, Mary would say terms, and I'd be like, I don't know what that means. I have no
Really? Well, like I said,
clue.
now the opposite is true. So,
Right now, she'll call me and ask me, and I'm glad to be able to help because I there were times I think that I talked to Mary. Like if a day or two went by and we didn't talk, it was like, are you still alive? Because um, we haven't
that's true.
talked today.
Yeah.
So, but I don't know how we get that
Yeah. Yeah.
um, with other groups. So
Yeah.
it's just
It
something to continue to work toward, I guess.
it
And
is. It is. And as we mentioned that, 2025, my project 2025, that's scary. And how is that going to be implemented? And if there can be some sort of um collective response, I think that could be so helpful. I just wanted to answer, I just looking at my notes, Laura asked about politicians, California politicians that helped. And I just wanted to give a little bit of information. As I mentioned, Diane Feinstein was very helpful in terms of helping to get that language, the appropriations language that banned the sale of horses, devils or Forest Service horses for slaughter. Um, and also General Xavier Becerra, I think I pronounced that right, Assembly Member Todd Gloria, and also 22 of his legislative colleagues. So there was some really good support from California, um, not only at the state level, but at the federal level.
Deborah mentioned Horse Plus Coalition is trying to get all to go to Washington together, like the
Mm,
ranchers do. If you guys go to
mm.
our YouTube channel, or even if you go to our website at chwha.org and look up the summit, Linda Greaves' presentation, she talked about the Wild
That's
Horse
right.
Summit they're going to have in
Mm,
Utah, but they also are planning, and I know that she's working, I think, with Horse Plus Coalition, um, to have a lobby day where everybody can meet in Washington, D.C. and lobby their legislators together. So, and also, too, you don't have to go to Washington, D.C., just so you know, with the way that we have now. I had some really great virtual meetings last week with members of the House, and I'm continuing to do that as we keep working for our legislation. So,
mhm.
but those relationships with your state and federal legislators, I can't stress that enough, are so important. So we also will have a presentation. I want to say next weekend, maybe the weekend after, I can't remember, with one of our state legislators, Josh Boucher, who has been
Mhm.
really instrumental in helping me learn a lot about state legislature here in North Dakota, but also the importance of that state relationships and how we can get some federal movement because of that.
Mm,
So we're doing our best to try to get as many
yeah.
different people here to educate
Mm.
stuff. So
Yeah.
um,
And I wanted to mention too, Chris, I know that you're always, always pushing for people to call their legislators, both state and federal. And that has become a really important lesson for me. And I've been doing that more and more. Because I know you're saying is, you never know when that open door may appear. And I think
right.
that's a really good philosophy. And I also I also want to say that I think the huge, huge possibility that the Theodore Roosevelt horses will get federal protection. I think that's a big win for wild horse herds and advocates, even though I shouldn't say even though, but the fact that they're National Park Service, I have to get this right. I think that can have really important implications, and I think it can show both state and federal legislators, what possibilities are, and by getting, you know, uh, every all stakeholders in a particular state involved, that was just such a great strategy, and I think maybe too, it's building coalitions with wild horse and burro groups, but I think you did a good job building coalitions with, as I said, stakeholders who have an interest in maintaining the Theodore Roosevelt horses.
Right.
Um, I think that can be valuable too.
I think that those things are important also because as much as like, we're trying to this month do what we can to help educate people and have people with more knowledge on different things like you come in and talk. I think that we have to also realize as advocates, like I don't have all the answers. And when I don't have all the answers, I am very lucky because I've built a lot of great relationships over the year. I can call different people and say, hey, this is what's happening. Can you help me, with this? Or even,
Mhm.
Patrick Springer was great when we had the talk about working with the press. There were a lot of times where they were asking me things and I don't have that answer, but hey, if you want
Right,
to talk
right.
to Craig Downer, I can give you his number and he can tell you from an ecological standpoint, or our lawyers talk to the press or, you know, and I think also recognizing that our state and federal legislators also don't know
Mhm,
everything that's
mhm.
happening, and it's our job to let them know.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I, I was looking through some old stuff the other day, and like for example, our North Dakota state legislators are only in session for 80 days every other year in odd years. And last year, when they had their session, they had over 1,000 pieces of legislation.
Wow.
And that legislation is anything from transportation, the horses in the park, education, budgets, taxes. There's no way that any one legislator could be know everything that's happening in the state of North Dakota. That's for us to come to them and say, hey, there's a problem here. What can we do to fix it? Um, and so that's our jobs, and also to help bring other expert people. I was also blessed too when we had our legislative session and we needed people to come and testify. I can call people like Eric Molvar, who we
Mhm,
all said was like
mhm.
such a great wildlife biologist, so he can come and bring some science to that. And so that's why
Exactly. In a
every,
different perspective too.
exactly, and every relationship that you can make along the way is so important, and I can't stress that enough. So
I
none of us
agree.
have all the answers, not our legislators, not us as advocates.
Hmm.
But I think that we can come together and really pull on each other's strengths, and that's
Yeah,
really been great. So
yeah.
it,
And that
it
lobbying is so important. I noticed there was a comment about how the cattle lobby is so, so
yep,
strong.
yep.
Um, I think it's possible that wild horse and rural and public land supporters could build a decent coalition and lobbying. I mean, that would be wonderful. But again, I'm just kind of I'm realizing too, if we can it's not just wild horse and burro advocates or supporters, because we have to think about public lands too, because they're so interconnected. So,
Right.
as you said, building those coalitions with outside groups like, Western Watershed Project, and there's other ones too that I think can make effective allies. I hate to use that word because it's so kind of, I don't know, popular right now, but I think allies can be really important because we do have common interests.
Right. Isabella said if we could have an umbrella membership group, think like the Cattlemen's Association,
Yes.
even if it's West and East Coast groups, the vast number that would impress um, politicians, strengthen
Mhm.
numbers. Yeah, and that would also be a problem with, what do you call that group? And then they would be nitpicking over that. I could see that, but I agree.
Yeah, it's and the other thing, I live out in the East Coast, and what I found is that most people out here don't have any idea what's happening out west. And I really wish that there could be more education and more awareness that the public lands are out west are our lands no matter where we live.
Exactly.
And those horses and burros are our horses and burros no matter where we live. So I think trying to help make this not just a West Coast issue, uh, or a Western issue would be really helpful. Oh, I just saw, so no, somebody said something about New Jersey.
Yeah,
Uh,
Deborah said New Jersey too. They do
yeah,
have a New Jersey
exactly.
group on Facebook.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, Linda Greaves and Britta Hessler are really trying to do a lot to bring people together to advocate and to lobby and different things like that. So they're also great people to follow and to
Mhm.
and I know Linda this year they're having their conference in Utah, and part of that includes also being able to go out to the range and stuff too. So
Yes, yeah.
um so that's important for some people too who've never been there, or to help educate people that way too. So yeah.
Yeah, great. Those are all wonderful ideas. And, I want to be a little optimistic because I think there's a lot of passion and a lot of interest. I think it's just a question of, trying to find out what common denominators are. And like I said, that money issue is also huge too. So,
I always feel like money and fertility control, those seem to be the
oh,
two
yeah. Yeah.
dying pieces
Mhm.
of any. I've had people that are like, because I've tried to advocate for them to use PZP in Theodore Roosevelt National Park. I've
Mhm.
had people that were very
Mhm.
angry with me, but they're using Gonacon right
Right.
now and sterilizing the horses.
Mhm.
Like there has
Yeah.
to be something because it's a fenced park, and that's not, we have to pick our fights also. I will never
Mhm.
win a fight to say we don't want them to use fertility control on those horses. We'll never win that
Mhm.
fight. I mean, it's
Mhm.
just
Yeah,
um
I agree with
so
that.
so what's the least um what's the
Yeah.
least harmful to this herd? So yeah.
Mm. And also too, I think that, there are obviously groups that heavily support PCP, but I think most of them also realize that that's not the silver bullet. There has to be, other options too, fertility control with rangeland improvement. Um, I'm just trying to think of some other, the Forest Service has a regulation that says removed wild horses should be um, transported or moved to another territory that either is, I think, one of the inactive territories or hasn't reached AML. So that might be a way to help wild horses. And the big issue is always, well, not just livestock grazing, and I know Lori Ford would agree with this, but also, the mining and the extraction industries. I mean, that is huge compared to the number of wild horses. I mean, look at, all of, the data or that show that, for every one wild horse, there's anywhere from 20 to 50 to 100 cow-calf pairs. That is the big battle. So, another option is trying to buy out leases on different allotments. I've heard, that a lot of ranchers would love to be able to get bought out. So I think that there are other ways to protect wild horses. And, and sometimes, like I said, PZP, I don't think it's the silver bullet, but it could be part of a package.
Isabella said, "Isn't moving horses and burros from their home range against the Wild Horse and Burro Act?"
My understanding is that with the Forest Service, that horses and burros could be moved because it would still be part of Forest Service territories.
Mm.
And I can't remember what the regulation is, but if you go and look for Forest Service regulations, you'll see it.
And it's sad though. I think that we're also stuck in a hard place because, like, this is a
Mhm.
program that just altogether just needs to be revamped, really. Um,
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
I know that Eric talked about in his presentation, Karen Bud Fallon, who I did talk to last year, and she is directly under Bergam, and she is the person
I
that's
forgot you did. Right. Yeah.
handling wild horse and burro issues. And I can tell you, I was, she granted me a meeting, but it was not extremely impressive. And I've been
Mhm.
waiting almost a year for an answer from her for
Mhm.
follow-ups from the meeting. But we're just up against so much, in the
Exactly.
world
Yeah.
right now that this is just so secondary. And like I said,
Mhm.
sometimes I feel like, the world's on fire around me, and I just keep jumping up and down on this little southwestern corner of North Dakota saying, "Hey, don't forget about the horses over here."
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, but yeah, Eric talked a little bit too about the possible buyouts of
Yeah,
allotments
yeah,
and stuff
that
too.
could be. One of the things is, when you read a lot of the kind of anti-horse and burro rhetoric, they always bring up, I forgot, like there's 80,000 horses. And I mean, that's nothing compared to the grazing,
Yeah.
of cow-calf pairs. It's not just one cow, it's cow-calf pairs and sheep. And so it just, but sometimes it, it's not that many horses or burros. It really isn't. And if the habitat was managed better and these animals could be accommodated. So I had a point now I can't remember what it was. So anyway, but no, I mean I think there are solutions and um
I
like
think
I
we have to
said,
just
I
start
I
thinking outside the box, and we can't keep doing
yeah,
the same
yeah,
things that we've
for
always
sure,
done.
for sure.
So we have to find some ways for that. And we are having, just so you guys know, the last presentation we'll have on February 1st is a closing thoughts where everybody's videos will be on and everyone will be unmuted, and we can just have a conversation about, what worked, what didn't, what was interesting, and just maybe some brainstorming sessions like this. So I hope that you guys will sign up for that too. So
Mhm.
is there a presentation on possible buyouts and how to? No, but that's something that maybe I can ask Eric Mulvar to
Yeah,
to do it another time, and we can do that outside of the summit because it is
yeah.
something he's talked about a few times. So,
There's
um,
there's a number of articles, and I believe, and in fact, I'm pretty certain there's legislation that is sort of floating around that would allow that to happen. Excuse me. So if you want to do a little bit of research, I think you'd find some good stuff. But I also think it would be good, if you had a presentation. I feel like, I don't mean to put one more thing on your plate,
no,
but
but it would be a good. It's something that Eric's talked about. So maybe if I reach out to him and ask him if he can let us know, like, how do we do that, or
yeah,
how do
for
you even
sure.
start to look at that?
Yeah.
It is a
And
possible solution.
also having an open discussion, like you mentioned, I think that's one way to to help trying to bring together some cohesion. So that in itself, I think, is a nice first step among advocates and groups, advocacy groups.
Yeah. So that's open to anybody who wants to come. So yeah,
Mhm.
it would be nice if we had some other groups, but we'll see what happens. So um and then I just want to remind everybody, if you signed up for Grace Kuhn's presentation tomorrow, I'm very sorry to say that she had a family emergency and we have to cancel that. I am working on trying to get that rescheduled with her, even if it's outside of the summit, because Grace has a ton of great information to
Mhm.
share, and I'm
Mhm.
sure that once she gets settled and things calm down in her life, maybe we can look at getting that rescheduled. So I'll share information on our website about that too. Yeah, Grace is wonderful. I love
Yeah,
Grace.
I was just going to say, I hope you can get her because I worked with her for a long while and she is just an amazing person.
Yeah. So anybody else have
Force.
any other questions, thoughts, comments, anything to this was a really great conversation, Mary. So thank you. Great
Thank you so
presentation
much.
and
And again, I really appreciate all of you taking your time and it just like I said, I think I want to be a little optimistic. So, and like I said, your questions and your enthusiasm make me feel optimistic. And again, Chris, always wonderful to do something with you. We'll talk Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday, whenever.
I'm sure we will.
Okay. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.